So, good morning to all of you. Hope all of you are doing well. Not only you, even your family members are also doing well in this very pathetic condition all over the world, all over the state, but more particularly in our Kumta and on our Kalu. So, hope that all of you take care of yourself and family. At the same time, we have to continue our teaching learning process also. So that's why uh, we have to continue with our syllabus. So in the last class, we have discussed about the microscopy and then different terminologies that are associated and different types of microscopes also, starting from light microscope to in that different versions of the light microscope. Then we have also studied the electron microscopes, both TEM and SEM. There is the scanning electron microscope and transmission electron microscope. So today we will move a step forward with another interesting topic under this, that is the cell and its function. Probably in biology there is nothing more important than the study of cell, which in its simple form may be stated as the fundamental unit of life. Of course, this is the fundamental unit of life, and all of us know the life also started, the very primitive life started with a single cell. So that's why it is, I think it is very, very important to know the cell and different organelles of the cell. So now, if you want to call anything as living, the first thing what you look forward is whether it is made out of a cell. That to a living cell means a living organism. Undoubtedly, you know, all living organisms are made up of cells. What exactly meant by a cell? When we think about the cell, it is very small and there must be a boundary. That is, the boundary is nothing but a membrane enclosed structure inside which you can see filled with some liquid solution, wherein all organelles and other subcellular structures are formed. What are organelle? Many times the students have the confusion between organelle and organ. Remember, organ is a much larger one. That's a group of tissues. But whereas the organelles are nothing but the the constituents of the cell. Or in other words, whatever the subcellular structure that you observe inside the cell, you call them as organelle. So that's why I don't get confused between organelle and organ. So that's why a cell is a small membrane enclosed structure which is filled with an aqueous solution. That aqueous solution we call it as cytoplasm. That is the liquid solution. And within this cytoplasm, you can see number of cell organelles and some other subcellular structures are formed. When I say organelles, that includes mitochondria, Golgi complex, ribosomes, anything which you know, which is found inside the cell. And in addition to this, there are many other subcellular organelles, probably non-living substances, are also found there, and they are also found suspended or floating in the cytoplasm, which has been externally bordered by a membrane. That is what we call as a cell. There is a theory known as cell theory. Very, very interesting and most fundamental theory of the life is the cell theory. In fact, the study of the cell started in 1830s. Probably the invention of the microscope and observation of a cork cell by Robert Hooke. So based on the detailed study of the cell theory was proposed. And in fact, this cell theory is so important that that is the unifying concept in the biology. The very basic, fundamental, unifying concept. If you want to search in biology, that is nothing but the cell theory. This cell theory originated mainly by the work of a biologist, that is Sheldon and Shawan, in 1838 to 90. So these two biologists, cytologists, cell biologists, the Sheldon and Shawan, they have proposed this cell theory. That is, both are German. One is the Shawan is the Matthias Sheldon is a German scientist in 1839, and another one was a botanist. Sheldon was a botanist, and Shawan was the zoologist. Both of them are German biologists. So then they have proposed this cell theory. Entire cell theory is not proposed by only both Sheldon and Shawan. One more person, that is Rudolf Virchow, again a German physician, a German doctor. He has proposed another, added one more concept to the cell theory. What this Sheldon and Shawan said was, all organisms are composed of cells. The most fundamental theory, that's why I have told you. Anything which is not made out of cell, it will be very difficult to call it as a living being. If you want to call anything the living organism, then it must be composed of cells. So that's why it is said that the cell is the basic unit of life. The most basic and fundamental unit of life is nothing but the cell. So this is the most unifying theory. All organisms are composed of cells. If anything not composed of cell, we don't call it as an organism. Please try to understand. Then another German physician, Rudolf Virchow, in 1850s, added one more thing to the cell theory, that he says that all cells come from pre-existing cells. What does it mean? All the new cells that are formed in the body, they are the contribution of pre-existing cells. If at all there is a cell, it can divide and form the daughter cells. That all of us know. So now, a cell cannot come from the vacuum or by making some magic. A new cells can be formed, and it can come only from the pre-existing cells. Only from the pre-existing cells. If at all there is a living cell, from there a new cell can be formed. So from some inorganic material or inorganic source, no cells can be formed. So that's why all cells, all new cells, you make it More precise, all new cells come from only from pre-existing cells. Then third observation or third unit of the cell theory is cells are the smallest structural and functional unit of organism. I already told you the cells are the basic unit of life. They are the smallest structural and functional unit. In the sense, if you go on analyzing the life, ultimately you end up in the cell because that is the smallest structural and functional unit. Then suppose if you dissect the cells, there is no, it no more becomes a functional unit of organism. When the cell is intact, functional, and it becomes the fundamental or basic, or in other words, the smallest structural as well as functional unit of any living being. So that's a, to summarize this, all living cells are made up of cells. All living things. I have given you some photographs there. You can see all of them, their body is made up of cells. New cells are produced from existing cells. New cells are the contribution from pre-existing cells. That is, and cells are the basic unit of structure and function of all living beings. In other words, you can also say that the cells are the structural and functional units of all living beings. That is what the cell theory proposes. For the better understanding of the cell, let's try to understand some of the very important functions that are carried by the cells. Before studying each and every function, I would like to inform you that whatever the life process that is taking place, so as to make an organism living, all those life processes are conducted by or carried out by the cells. Either as an individual cell or in unanimity with other cells. By forming a groups or sometimes individually, depending upon the living organisms, I can say. All functions what are required to make an organism living, that is undoubtedly carried by the cells only. Now, for the very purpose of keeping an organism alive, cells have to work together in all the multicellular organisms. To make an organism alive, cells should work together and perform all basic life processes. Then only the organism remain alive. Suppose if some cells start behaving erratically, where they do not work together and fail to carry out the basic life process, then it will lead to the death of the organism. So that's why the very important function of the cell is to work together, work in groups with better understanding with the remaining cells, and then to carry out the basic life process. Once this basic life process are carried out by the combined effort of all the cells that makes the organism truly alive. That makes the organism alive. Otherwise not. So now, this is the only one function I can see that the cell does. Now the question comes, what are the basic life processes? There are many basic life processes. What are those basic life processes? One is to get rid of the body waste. Because for the very survival of an organism, there must be a metabolism. When the metabolic activities are carried out, naturally this activity or process produces lot of body waste. And if their body waste remain in the body, it becomes toxic or poisonous. It becomes toxic and poisonous. Then it is the duty of the cells to remove or to excrete or to push out this body waste. So the cells promptly does this work, all these things. Cell does promptly this thing. Then making new cells for growth and repair is another basic life process. Already we know that the cells can be formed from pre-existing cells. So that's why, if at all the new cells are added to the organism for the purpose of growth or by repairing, because sometimes the cell gets damaged and they are to be removed and new cells are to be filled in that space. This process of making the new cells for the very purpose of growth and repair is another important function of the cell. That's also very essential for, or comes under the category of basic life process. Then releasing energy from food. All our life process needs energy. All our life processes need energy. Because the entire life process is an energy intensive process. For this energy intensive process, we should get the energy. How do we get the energy? All of us know all organisms get energy from the food that they eat, or they prepare in case of the plants. Among animals, we get energy from the food that we eat, but in plants, from the food that they prepare by the process of photosynthesis. Now, extracting the energy from the food and releasing that for the purpose of life process is to be done by the cells. Because whatever the food the organisms eat, the food is in the form of chemical energy. And this chemical energy is to be converted into biological energy for this life process. And this is done at a very, very subtle level, at the cellular level. And this process of releasing energy from the food in this hidden form is achieved by undertaking lot of biochemical reactions within the cell and cytoplasm. So this release of energy so that the organisms can undertake the life process and remain alive is done by these cells. Now, how many cells may be there in the body? Depends on the size of the organism. Now, even if you take the example of our human body, the number of cells in each one's body depend on the size class and the weight. Suppose a person weighing 50 kg may be having less number of cells, and a person who is weighing 150 kg may be having more number of cells. So that's why it is not possible to say exactly how many cells in a human body, because changes from person to person. Not only for human beings, this is true for all the organisms. But if you take the average, probably in human being there are 50 trillion cells, 50 million cells. On an average it is. That's it. In front of 5 you have to put 13 zeros. In front of 5, if you put 13 zeros, that is the average number of cells. Okay, say we have 50 trillion cells. But remember, all cells are not of the same type. All cells are not of the same type. They differ. And there are different types of cells which work in harmony. Not one type of cell, there are different type of cells, and all cells should work in harmony so as to maintain the life process. So the cells are not uniform, the cells are diverse. So now let's try to understand about the diversity of cell only. First, what are the different types of cells and what are their role in the living being? I consider these are also very important for the better understanding of the cell. I have told you the cells are diverse. Whether we will be able to form any classification? Yes, of course. First, we can classify the cell into two basic types. Basically, there can be two types of cells. That is the prokaryotic cells and another one, the eukaryotic cells. The cells, very primitive cells, without a definite nucleus, we call it as a prokaryotic cell, and a cell with definite nucleus, we call it as a eukaryotic cells. Now, coming to the size of the cell, varies. Again, a typical plant cell will be measuring about 10 to 100 millimicrons. Then, if you look into the animal cells, there is much variation. For example, a protozoan, say the trypanosoma. All of you know, in protozoans the entire body is made out of single cell, which is about 25 millimicrons long. Some green algae like Chlamydomonas, 5 to 6 microns. Some of the viruses are measured in nanometers. For example, HIV virus is 100 nanometers. TMV, tobacco mosaic virus, 300 nanometers. A bacteria, most common gut bacteria, that is E. coli, Escherichia coli, 1 to 5 millimicrons. Human blood cells ranges from 7 to 8 millimicrons in diameter, whereas the nerve cells, neuron is about 70 millimicrons. So here, up to here, all these things can be observed using the light microscope because they are larger in size. But if you go to DNA or virus and other things, which are in nanometer, the size is in nanometer, for this you need the assistance of an electron microscope. Now, we have seen that in the previous photograph only, the size of the cell varies. Even you might have seen the shape of the cell also varies. See, this is the trypanosoma shape, this is the RBC, this is the neuron, whereas this is an Escherichia coli bacterium, even Chlamydomonas green algae. So, there is a great variation as far as size and even in the shape. What commonality we can draw here is size and shape depends upon its function. For example, the nerve cells which you have seen, it is long elongated. Why? It is the shape and size depends on its function, because these nerve cells, they are meant to carry the electrical signals. So that's why they are long, linear, elongated. That means the size and shape depends upon the function. You have seen the RBC cells. Why they are round and so? Because they should be able to squeeze through the minute blood capillaries. They are this shape. They should be perfect. They should fit themselves in the smallest blood vessels, that is the blood capillaries. If you see the muscle cells, they are also long and thin, because that is meant for contraction. The contraction of muscle cells bring the movement. Even the nerve cells, which carry the signals to the brain or different parts of the body, are also very long, because they have to conduct the impulses. So that's why you cannot attribute a definite shape to the cell. Probably now you have also come to the conclusion that shape of the cell is highly variable, depending upon the structure and function, mainly the function of that, highly variable. Many may be spherical in shape. Even there are cells which are irregular in shape. If you look into this amoeba, all of you have studied about amoeba. Amoeba is a unicellular organism. Entire living being means one cell. What is the shape of amoeba? Well, it is very easy to draw. If you put any diagram, I should okay, because it has irregular shape. There is no definite shape for amoeba. It goes on changing depending upon the use of its pseudopodia. Then some of the cells are disc shaped, for example, the human RBC. Some are cylindrical, like the skeletal muscles. Needle like, in plant, in vegetable fibers, these cells are like a needle fibers. Sometimes the cell may appear as if the tiles are fitted on the floor. As if the tiles are fitted on the floor. The epidermal cells, especially the squamous epithelium, which is lining the outermost layer of the living being, epidermis, there it looks like as if the tiles are fitted. The shape is like that. See here again, different shapes, size. Yeah, again coming back to the classification of the cell. There are two types. One is prokaryotic and another one is the eukaryotic. If you look into the evolution of the cell, the first cell type which evolved on this earth is prokaryotic cells. Even today many organisms are having prokaryotic cells, especially the cells of many bacteria and archaea. They are prokaryotic cells. Here in the prokaryotic cell, there is no membrane bound nucleus. That means there is no distinct nucleus. In the cytoplasm only you can see the DNA concentration. But in here, and even though there are some cell organelles like ribosomes, they are not bounded by membranes. They are not externally covered by membranes. So that's why the prokaryotic cells are considered as very primitive type of cells without any membrane bound nucleus. There is no distinct nucleus. So that's why the DNA concentration is seen in the cytoplasm. And cell organelles are also not bounded by the membrane. From these prokaryotic cells, over a period of time, these eukaryotic cells must have been evolved with better structural details. A eukaryotic cell is always membrane bound cell. That's a distinct nucleus because the nucleus is externally bounded by the membrane. Nucleus is externally bounded by the membrane so as to make the nucleus distinct. Within the nucleus you can see the concentration of DNA and all those things, chromosomes and all. Maximum number of cells that we have today are eukaryotic cells. They are found in fungi, protists, even in many plants and animal cells also. Compared to prokaryotes, eukaryotes have many more organelles in the cytoplasm. Compared to prokaryotes, the number of organelles are also limited. Whereas in eukaryotes, one can see, observe and identify many more organelles than the prokaryotes. So here they have membrane bound nucleus. All organelles which are seen in the eukaryotic cell are also bounded by membranes. Either it may be mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, lysosome, vacuole, whatever the things you name, the living things in the cell, they are all membrane bound. Either it may be in plant or animal. That means eukaryotic cells have lots of internal membrane bound structures. Eukaryotic cells have lots of internal membrane bound structures compared to prokaryotes. See, this is a eukaryotic cell, an animal cell. See how many organelles you can see here. Compared to the prokaryotic cell that you have observed. So here we have Golgi apparatus, mitochondria. Mitochondria there also, lysosome, smooth endoplasmic reticulum and rough endoplasmic reticulum, microfilaments, cilia, microtubules, centrioles, cytoplasm. Of course, cytoplasm is there also. Nucleolus, nucleus. So more complex. By this, what we understand is, compared to prokaryotes, eukaryotic cells are more complex. By having more number of membrane bound organelles. Why these eukaryotic cells are more complex? They have to carry out more complex activities of the cell. See, in both plants and animal cells, in eukaryotic, they are all having organelles, and those organelles, any organelle you see here, they are all bounded by the membrane. Okay, this is one way of classifying the cell, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. There is also one more way where you can classify the cell into plant cell and animal cell. See, the plant cell. Then this is the animal cell. What are the major differences? The difference between the plant cell and animal cell, all of you know that, but just to refresh your memory, plant cells have cell wall, animal cells do not have. Plant cells have mainly chloroplast, animal cells generally do not have. In plant cells you can see more vacuoles, in animal cell it is very less. So these are some of the very important differences between plants and animals. Now, with all this introduction about the cell, probably now we can move on to the study of the cells. So for the very purpose of studying the cell, let's divide the cell into number of components. This is only to achieve the better understanding. We will take a typical cell, plant cell first. A cell has 4 components. If it is plant cell, it has 4 components. If it is animal cell, we have only 3 components. The first component, let's enter the cell from outside. The outermost layer or outermost part of of the plant cell is the cell wall. Hard, rigid, protects the cell. Then if you pass through the cell wall, don't take it literally, you will not be able to pass through the cell wall. But if you cross the cell wall, then you lands upon cell membrane or plasma membrane. In case of the plant cell, if it is the animal cell, the cell membrane or plasma membrane or what you call plasma lemma, that is the outermost boundary. So that's why I told you, animal cells have 4 components, whereas the plant cells have animal cells have 3 components, whereas the plant cells have 4 components, because they have additional thing, that is what you call cell wall. So then comes the cell membrane or plasma membrane or plasma lemma. It is the common component of the cell irrespective of whether it's a plant cell or animal cell. Then if you cross inside the plasma membrane is the boundary for animal cell, which encloses the third compartment, the third component, that is the cytoplasm, which is a aqueous or fluid which has been externally covered by, protected by the plasma membrane. The cytoplasm is there. And within the cytoplasm, the last component, the nucleus. But here when we studied the cytoplasm, there are many cell organelles which are embedded, floating stuff in the cytoplasm. Then in the center, so in most of the cases, if not in all, that's a nucleus is there. That's in eukaryotic cell, because nucleus is there because it is bounded by again a membrane and makes it very distinct inside the cytoplasm. So these are the 4 components of the cell: cell wall, cell membrane, cytoplasm and nucleus. In case of the plant cell, if it is the animal cell, it is the plasma membrane, cytoplasm and nucleus. This is how a cell appears. So now actually I have used the word organelle. What do you mean by organelle? Organelle means little organs. In the very beginning I have made it very clear. Don't get confused between organelle and organ. Organ is a larger one, which is the group of cells, whereas organelle refers to the components of the cell which are embedded in the cytoplasm. So in between the organism, what you see is cytoplasm or cytosol. Everything in a cell except the nucleus is cytoplasm. Any aqueous material that is externally bounded by the plasma membrane is the cytoplasm or cytosol. So now, if we want to study the cell one by one, even if you take the plant cell, the outermost thing which surrounds the cell is the cell wall. The cell wall is the outermost boundary and it's a non-living component of the cell. And it is rigid. This cell wall is made up of pectin and cellulose. Pectin and cellulose. Basically, there are two types of cell wall. One is the primary cell wall, which is thin and single layered, specially found in young and tender cells. Most of you are the students of botany also, so you know this. They are thin and single layer and usually found in young and tender cells. The other type is the secondary cell wall, which is matured, grown up, with well-developed cells you can see. They are thick because along with the pectin and cellulose, you can also expect one more material, that is lignin. So this cell wall is found in plant and bacterial cells, and it's a rigid and protective barrier. It protects the cell, and that lies just outside the plasma membrane or cell membrane. Cell wall, most commonly found. So this is how there's a formation of a cell wall you can see. What are the functions of cell? The most important function of the cell is protection. That protects the inside soft cell. Not only that, it also provides the mechanical strength and support. It provides mechanical strength. In plant cell, the shape of the cell is decided by the cell wall. But at the same time, the cell wall is not impermeable. It allows the movement of water in and out of the cell along with some solutes. So this cell wall allows the movement of water in and out of the cell along with the solute. That is, the nourishment to the cell is provided by the cell wall. That means allowing this movement of water as well as some solute materials. So these are the functions of the cell wall. I am not going in detail about the structure of the cell because that will be dealt in detail, in depth in botany. But as a cursory glance, I have given you very basic information about the cell wall. Now, after the cell wall, the next one is cell membrane or plasma membrane in plant cell. And if it is animal cell, the study of cell starts with the plasma membrane because that is the external boundary for a animal cell. Because all of you know, animal cells too are divided of this cell wall. There is no cell wall. The cell means externally covered by cell membrane or plasma membrane in case of the animal cells. So we have here onwards, we will be more descriptive because these are the components of animal cell also. So for the time being, I will stop here and we will continue that in the next class. But before that, I have seen many students are joining the class 10 minutes after the start of the class, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. This is no good because you don't have any other work other than attending the class. So I will mark your attendance and I will take the copy from this Google and I will keep it with me. And once the class started, the offline class started, that will be viewed very seriously. And still few students are not attending the classes. Even they are not going through the video that has been uploaded also. So all these things will be viewed very seriously, and you have to join the class exactly at the time that has been mentioned in your timetable. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮನಸ್ಸಿಗೆ ಬಂದಷ್ಟೊತ್ತಿಗೆ ಬರಲಿಕ್ಕಾಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ರಿಮೆಂಬರ್,